All right, folks, let's break down the ongoing legal battle involving Melania Trump because it's quite the spectacle. She's using every tactic possible to dodge being served legal papers in a defamation case filed by journalist Michael Wolff. The central argument from Melania's legal team? She's claiming that the doorman at Trump Tower received the legal papers, but she herself was never served directly. According to her, this means service hasn't been properly completed, and she believes this gives her grounds to delay the case. However, there's more going on beneath the surface here. The real reason Melania didn't get served personally may be that she's been actively dodging the process servers. She's constantly on the move, from Mar-a-Lago in Florida to Trump Tower in New York to Bedminster in New Jersey, and occasionally back to the White House. It's like she's playing an elaborate game of hide and seek with no one being able to pin her down long enough to hand her the papers. But here's the thing, this tactic is problematic in federal court. You can't just avoid service and claim that because you successfully evaded the process server, the case should be dismissed. This isn't a legitimate legal strategy, it's a losing argument. Melania's legal team knows this, which is why they have a backup plan. If their primary argument about dodging service doesn't work, they're aiming to move the case to Florida. Why Florida? Because if the case gets transferred, it could potentially end up in front of Judge Alan Cannon, a judge who's been very favorable to Donald Trump in the past. This is the same judge who dismissed his classified documents case. The move to Florida is not just about jurisdiction. It's a strategic attempt to get this case in front of a judge who has been sympathetic to Trump's legal issues. It's worth asking, is the whole issue with service simply a ruse to get this case in front of Judge Cannon? Let's take a step back and look at how this all started. Michael Wolff is an investigative journalist who's been covering high-profile public figures. His reporting led him to connect some troubling dots between Melania Trump, her connections with Jeffrey Epstein, and her history in the modeling world. Wolff's investigation included details about the Lolita Express, Epstein's infamous private plane, and even speculations about the personal lives of Trump and Melania. These revelations were controversial, and as you can imagine, Melania didn't take kindly to the public scrutiny. In response, Melania's lawyer, Alejandro Breto, sent Wolff a demand letter back in October threatening a billion-dollar defamation lawsuit unless he retracted his statements and apologized. $1 billion. That's the price Melania is allegedly asking for to settle this matter. This astronomical demand wasn't just a vague threat. It was tied to the allegations Wolff had made about her involvement with Epstein, the modeling world, and other damaging claims. Instead of backing down, Wolff fought back strategically. He filed his own lawsuit in New York State Supreme Court, seeking a declaration from the judge that his statements about Melania and Epstein were either true or not defamatory. He also sought to have the billion-dollar demand recognized as an unconstitutional attempt to infringe on his First Amendment rights as a journalist. By filing first, Wolff turned the tables on Melania's team, forcing them to respond in court. But here's where the legal process gets tricky. For any lawsuit to proceed, you need to serve the defendant with legal papers. You can't just file papers with the court and expect the case to move forward. In this case, Melania's legal team is arguing that service was not properly executed. They claim that the papers were given to the doorman, not Melania personally, which they believe invalidates the process. This is their primary legal argument in the latest filing. However, what's really happening here is that Melania has been actively evading the process servers. They've tried serving her at Trump Tower, at Mar-a-Lago, and at other locations, but she's either not there or has moved before they can catch up to her. This is a classic tactic called dodge and evade. But in federal court, this strategy doesn't work. If someone is actively avoiding service, the court can approve what's called alternative service, which allows papers to be served in other ways, like through publication in a newspaper or serving the papers to the Secretary of State. What Michael Wolff's legal team did was hand the papers to the doorman at Trump Tower, where Melania lives part-time, and sent copies to her attorney. It's clear that Melania and her team know about the lawsuit because they've responded to it in court. If I were Michael Wolff's lawyers, I would argue that Melania has waived her right to challenge service because she's been given ample notice and is actively engaging in the legal proceedings. In federal court, evading service is a serious issue. Judges don't like it when defendants play games with the court system, and they tend to rule against those who try to delay proceedings through these kinds of tactics. But the service issue isn't the only problem. Melania's legal team is also arguing that there's no personal jurisdiction over her in New York. They claim she doesn't live there full time and therefore can't be sued in the state. This argument is especially weak because Melania spends a significant amount of time in New York, shopping, attending charity events, and watching her son Barron attend school. It's hard to argue that she doesn't have ties to New York when she's there so frequently. Let me explain a bit of legal jargon here. When a case is filed in a state, there has to be something called personal jurisdiction, which means that the court has the authority to hear the case against a person. There are two types of jurisdiction, general and specific. General jurisdiction means that the person is so connected to the state that they can be sued for anything in that state. Specific jurisdiction means that the lawsuit is related to something that happened in that state. In this case, Melania's legal team is arguing that New York doesn't have jurisdiction over her, but the facts suggest otherwise. Her legal team sent the demand letter to Wolf in New York, and Wolf's work, including the articles in the Daily Beast, is tied to the state. Finally, Melania's team is trying to get the case moved to Florida, specifically to the Southern District of Florida, where she lives part-time near Palm Beach. There are only 3 judges in that district who could potentially handle the case, and Melania's legal team is hoping it will be assigned to Judge Cannon, who has a history of favorable rulings for Trump. This move is so transparent that it's hard to ignore the pattern. Melania's team is hoping to get this case in front of Judge Cannon in Florida, where they believe they have a better chance of winning. So, in summary, we're watching a multi-layered legal strategy unfold. Melania's team is trying to avoid service, claim that New York doesn't have jurisdiction over her, and, if all else fails, transfer the case to Florida in the hopes of getting it before a judge who has shown sympathy to Trump in the past. Meanwhile, Wolf's team is fighting to keep the case in New York and protect his First Amendment rights as a journalist. The court's decision on these issues will determine the trajectory of the case in the coming weeks.